Hey, what's up, everyone? So, I put together a couple of brief thoughts on the things you should consider before diving into collecting the expanded universe. I think the first thing is sort of conceptual, but I think can kind of help you stay on track, maybe become a more successful bargain hunter, help get you closer to your goals, and it's establishing for yourself what you mean by complete. What's a complete collection to you? You may be a completist and may think you want everything, but even understanding what that means is important. Do you truly want everything, meaning even every variant edition, every republication, even if you already have the story in some other sort of version? What does complete mean to you if you're focused on a particular niche? Same thing. Great. You want to collect all the comics? Does that mean the trade paperbacks? Does it mean the original issues? Does it mean all the variant covers? What does complete mean to you? How do you know fundamentally that you're done with your collection? Somewhat related vein. There is no complete list out there. There's no complete checklist. No one really knows just how much is out there. Why? Because we're finding stuff all the time. Every year, there's at least something that comes out of the woodwork that someone forgot about, Lucasfilm licensing forgot about, fans forgot about, something that's published in a different country that, say, many in North America forget about or never knew about in the first place. There's just enough out there to keep us hunting for years to come, even without new legends having to be produced. Now, don't get me wrong, there's tons of really great lists out there, all of which sort of kind of overlap to create a really robust sense that gets us pretty darn close to understanding just the totality of everything needed to collect in order to have the full EU storyline in your collection. But there's eccentricities to lots of these lists, and a lot of these lists are still in the process of coming together, right? And so, I mean, obviously places to start are StarWarsTimeline.net, StarWarsTimeline.com, Nathan Butler's Timeline Gold, and a variety of other places. I wouldn't trust, say, something like Wikipedia or a number of other website resources because there's still little eccentric little areas that they're missing. I mean, the thing that I'm always so focused on are like these third-party RPG mags from around the world that contain, in many cases, licensed EU sort of compatible RPG scenarios. A lot of times those aren't included in these lists. There's things that are so obscure, some of the people building this list are still getting around to adding them in. And of course, there's always disagreements too by different fans about how much is truly official and not official and whatnot. But the point is that every list is going to be slightly different, and really knowing what the complete list is consequently almost part of the hunt, right? What's so valuable about tons of people going out there and trying to be completists and get everything is that they slowly sort of help us build the sort of the complete checklist, right? By identifying new things that we didn't know about in the first place. Another point that seems fairly obvious is, of course, create a budget for yourself so you don't go bankrupt doing this. But I think in a related vein, something that I found helpful that Mike Fessler, great Star Wars fan I've talked about before, you can find on Twitter, Mike Fessler, he's done for himself. He's a great collector, and he has a wonderful collection, a really, really amazing collection that sort of cuts across the swath of sort of EU collectibles, from the books and toys and promotional materials and things like that. But he sort of created like a top 100 list. Like, what's his true sort of wish list, right? There's a billion, almost infinite number of things that we could all collect in the Star Wars world. But he's really boiled it down to what are the things that he actually really wants to sort of ultimately track down, right? It makes it really easy when he finds those things to sort of pull the trigger versus always having to sort of weigh back and forth. Do I really want this? Do I have room for this? Does this fit the theme of my collection? Boil things down to your true essential wish list, and it makes life a lot easier, and it's, again, also makes it easier to sort of budget around as well. Another fairly obvious point, I hope, is buy in lots. If you're buying through third-party platforms like eBay and whatnot, don't go through the pain and misery of trying to track every individual thing down. If you can buy a bunch of lots, you're going to get a lot of duplicates and redundant stuff, but you can trade that. And again, if say your interest is in getting like all of the comics, right? Don't bother trying to find every individual, say, issue of the early Marvel run. Just find people selling them in a complete set, and it's expensive, but it's going to be expensive however you do it. So save up, and if it's part of your essential top 100 list, just go for it, right? Make life a lot easier for yourself. The other thing is, if you're in stores, if you like to go on the hunt, and if you don't like to rely on eBay and sources like that, I've said this a number of times, and I'm sure many of you do this as well, don't forget that in used bookstores, the children's section, the young adult section, the reference section, sections often that these stores have, like about movies and TV and screenplays and things like that. All of these sections contain Star Wars content and Star Wars material, and often EU material, whether it's comics or children's books or what have you. I've never understood why they don't put this all in sci-fi and fantasy, but they don't, and so you have to look all over the store, and you're going to find a lot of really cool, obscure, particularly sort of young adult children's stuff in those areas. Although occasionally you'll find stuff inappropriately tucked away in, like, say, the reference section, or even the movie section. You'll find a lot of the old, essential guides in, like, the movie section, because the people at the store don't know the difference if they're not Star Wars fans. It looks like a reference guide. It relates to Star Wars, so they think it must have something to do with one of the films, so they stick it there. So a really, really good place to look. I sort of alluded to this, but one sort of related thought about buying in lots is, if you are seeing really rare things at really good prices that you already have, consider buying them. It may be outside your budget, with respect at least to your top 100 wish list, right? But it may be something that you can then trade with someone else in the Star Wars sort of collecting community, right? So if you come across some, like, rare UK hardcover version of a book that was only released in paperback in the US and it's only for $20 or something, but you already have it, don't run to the cash register to pick that up so you can trade it for something else, right? I think a couple more things here. Let's see. Don't forget that, particularly if you're in North America, don't forget that there are lots of other eBays and Amazons in the world, right, that aren't just sort of focused around North American markets. And so there's a French eBay, there's a Spanish eBay, there are auction sites in Sweden, which is important because there's a really important Swedish gaming magazine that contains EU stories, right, Syncadis, right? I've written about it before and talked about it before. Look around the globe. Look at the Japanese version of Amazon, which sometimes sells really obscure Star Wars collectibles, not just from Japan, but from around the globe. So look around. You can pretty easily, in most cases, actually, say with eBay, log into these foreign eBay platforms with your North American eBay account, and often can do the same on Amazon and have these things shipped to you. You're going to pay some additional shipping costs and whatnot, but oftentimes this works, and oftentimes it's the only way of actually being able to sort of track this stuff down. No one is rushing to come to North American eBay sites to put their, very specific French sort of material, right, if they live in France or in the EU. But some of this stuff is stuff we need. Go to them, go to where they are, meet them in the middle, and they'll be happy to sell you these goods. Finally, though, the thing that I've been talking a lot about recently is that at the end of the day, you may want to dive in, you may want to start your EU collection, you may want to be a total completist, you may want to be a completist within a particular niche, but the sad fact is there are some things that are, for all intents and purposes, impossible to get, okay? And you kind of just need to accept that, right? We're just at a point now where this many years post-decanonization and discontinuation, stuff is now so out of print and so obscure and so hard to find that it will pop up from time to time. But it's okay to admit that your complete collection can have a little asterisk at the end that sort of says, well, except for these 3 holy grails that no one has, right? And stuff. So, whether it's, your physical copy of Dig magazine, or, the trade paperback of season 1 of the Clone Wars webcomics. The list goes on and on. I've made multiple videos about this. There are some things now that are just impossible to find, or really, really hard to find, or stupidly expensive to buy, that at the end of the day you don't really need. And to kind of circle back to the first point about defining really what is complete to you. I am a completist. I am a total completist, and by that I mean I'm someone who wants even the variants. I want every possible edition of everything I can get my hands on, and not just the books and the comics and the RPGs, but the cards and the board games and the movies and the video games and the third-party RPG mags that contain licensed EU content. The list goes on and on. There are some things, however, that even on that total list, I will admit, I don't encourage people to buy, even if they're completists, because there's a category of EU content that I sort of jokingly refer to as basically being one step above a coloring book, right? There are things that, and this is particularly true of, say, like, I don't know, the Clone Wars tie-in stuff, like children's tie-in books to the Filoni Clone Wars, in many cases have, at most on the margin, an additional set of sentences, right, that you don't see in one of the episodes, right? So do you really need it? You really don't. Is it technically new EU? Well, yeah, it is. And if you're a completist, maybe you can get it. Maybe you should get it. Maybe you want to get it. But you don't really need it. And just keep in mind that there's a vast amount of EU out there that even for completists, like really at the end of the day, again, amounts to something just a step above a coloring book in terms of its contributions to lore and its ability to tell a story, right? At most, you're getting some new images or a couple of new words and stuff. Now, that said, occasionally coloring books matter. Occasionally sticker books matter. Occasionally activity books matter, right? I mean, every once in a while you'll find something, as in the case of like a episode 1 sticker book. There was some confusion then, I think, based on sort of when it went into production about matching names to faces, right? And so there's some intriguing sort of elements, intriguing sort of contributions to lore relative to like who we think someone is and things like that. And there's of course the famous example of one of the variant Return of the Jedi coloring books that I still have the original of from way back in the early 80s. That actually misprints the names of one of the characters, right? Which again sort of adds this strange sort of mystery around like just what their backstory is, right? Well, were they called this or were they called that? It gets updated in a different edition. So again, that's the completist sort of like, going as far as you possibly can, right? But again, like if you're just a sort of a realistic completist, you'd look at that and say, that's just an error. That's just a stupid coloring book. You don't need that, right? And you know what? You'd probably be right. But again, circling back, really understand what completist means to you and understand really what you want your collection to be. And at the end of the day, collect it because it brings joy, and don't do it because you're in a race with other fans or because you're trying to hoard it, right? I mean, I've said pretty openly about a lot of the stuff that's getting reprinted now from the Legends era. I'm not rushing to pick it up. I want to support it. I want anyone who's willing and able to support it. But, I kind of want new fans to discover this stuff, and so I'm not buying the sole edition of Shatterpoint at my local Barnes & Noble because I want a new fan to go out there and discover that and see Mace Windu on a cover and think, hey, I like Samuel Jackson. I wonder what this book's all about, and then read it and really enjoy it and then get more into the EU. So I want to give new fans a chance, even though the completist in me is just itching to go out there, pick it up, and put it on the shelf. But anyway, those are just some preliminary thoughts, let's say, on what to consider before diving into collecting the EU. I would love to know your thoughts, and as more thoughts come to me, I will update in new videos. So talk to you later.